Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that. For your sake, I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
By the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night when Lord Shoreman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that even in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir, although I have had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I have only been married once, and that was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I am much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it is not a very interesting subject. I rarely think of it myself.
Very natural, I am sure. That would do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Earnest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure. What brings one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses others. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
No, perfectly horrid. Never spoke to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Of course. Hello, why all the teacups? Why the cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in someone so young? Who is coming to tea?
Merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How delightful.
Yes, it is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. This is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
Thought you'd come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly romantic.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose minds are so curiously constituted.
Yes, there's no speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches, Jack. They're ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
You have been eating them the entire time.
That is quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Here, have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is too.
Well, you need not eat it as if you were going to eat it all. You behave as if you are married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
How on earth do you say that?
In the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
That is nonsense.
It isn't. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
You consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? I don't know anyone with the name of Cecily, Algy. What on earth do you mean by Cecily?
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
You mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I was writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was nearly offering quite a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There is no use offering a reward now that the thing is found.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. And you have no right whatsoever to read what's written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Well, that's absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It's not the sort of thing one talks about in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. The cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, a charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Now, give it back to me.
But why should she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are small, some aunts are not. That doesn't matter that surely an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think as if every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. Now, give it back to me.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her dear uncle? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love, to a dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why not, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It is Earnest.
My name isn't Ernest. It's Jack. Now give it back to me, Algie.
You have always told me your name is Earnest. I've introduced you to everyone as the name of Earnest. You answer to the name of Earnest. You look as if your name is Earnest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It's perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's written on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if ever you attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town, and Jack in the country. And the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her dear uncle? Come on, boy, you'd much rather have the whole thing out at once.
Algie, you talk as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is what dentists always do. Besides, I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I am quite sure of it now.
A Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce the cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation and pray make it improbable.
There is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is perfectly ordinary. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me, in his will, guardian to Miss Cecily Cardew. Miss Cardew, who addresses me as uncle from motive of respect you cannot hardly understand, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where's that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I will tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that. I have Bunburyed all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
I fear you won't be able to understand my true motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce to either one's health or one's happiness, I have always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algie, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't at all be a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. Leave that to people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I've always suspected you of being a Bunburyist. You're one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest, so that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, so that I may be able to go down to the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I've really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know, you're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people more than not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family, and sent down with either no women at all, or two. In the third place, I know perfectly well whom she will place me next tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. It is not at all pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands across the dinner table is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. Simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, I want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill Earnest. I think I'll get rid of him at any rate. Cecily is a little too much interested in him, so I'm going to get rid of him. And I suggest you do the same with Mr. Your invalid friend with the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury, and if he ever gets married, which seems to be extremely problematic, then you'll be very glad to know Bunbury. All who marry without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
If I marry Gwendolen, and she's the only girl I ever saw in my life, I certainly wouldn't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama have been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time.
Don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
It isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I can get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I'm always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
No, you're quite perfect.
I hope I'm not that. It will leave no room for development. And I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon. I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't seen her since her poor husband's death. I've never seen a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Gwendolen, won't you come and sit here?
Thank you, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens! Lane, where are the cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir, not even for ready money.
That would do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
It greatly distresses me, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed color. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say. I've a wonderful treat for you tonight, Algernon. Thank you. I am going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice woman, and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I am afraid, Aunt Augusta, but I don't think I'll be able to dine with you tonight after all.
I should hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me, but I have just had a telegram informing me that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he is going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd, nor do I in any way approve of this modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I have been telling that to your poor uncle for years, but he never seems to take much notice as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly in a season when everyone has practically said whatever they've had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I can quite assure you that he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, then people don't listen, and if one plays bad music, then people don't talk. But I'll show you the program I've drawn out, if you will kindly join me into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. That is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People seem to think they are, well, improper, and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe is so. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I've met you, I have admired you more than any girl I've ever met. Since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you'd been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in more expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpits, I'm told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There's something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen.
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But you don't mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest, do you?
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know. But supposing it was something else. You mean to say you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, there's very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
To speak quite candidly, darling, I don't much care for the name of Earnest. I don't think it suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
I must say, I think there are many other much nicer names. Take Jack, for instance, as a charming name.
Jack? Oh, no, there is very little music in the name of Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. We must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you have led me to believe that you are not absolutely indifferent from me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Darling!
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it. I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does, or my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from that semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me. You are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged, I or your father, should his health permit, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young woman as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she should be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put you to, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn! The carriage.
Yes, Mamma.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. Although, I do have the same list that the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Yes, I must admit I smoke.
I am glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with a natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected from one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
Well, I own a house in the country with about 1,500 acres attached. But I don't rely on that for my real source of income. As far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope? A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature, like Gwendolen, could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but this is let to by the year to Lady Bloxham. I can get her back at any moment at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
She is a lady considerably advanced in years.
That is no guarantee of respectability of character. Which number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something, however, that can easily be altered.
Do you mean by the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
I'm afraid I really have none. I am a liberal unionist.
They count as Tories. They dine with us, or come in the evening, at any rate. Now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents, Lady Bracknell.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of aristocracy?
I'm afraid I don't really know. I said I had lost both my parents. It would be closer to the truth to have said that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
Yes. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew is a man of a very kindly and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, because he had a first-class ticket to Worthing at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did this charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket to this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, a somewhat large, brown, leather handbag, with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Mr. Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
The cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
The Brighton line.
The line, Mr. Worthing, is immaterial. I must confess, I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies which reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As in regards into which locality the handbag was found, the cloakroom at Victoria Station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion, has probably and indeed been used for that purpose before now, but could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for recognized position in good society.
May I ask what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire any relations as soon as possible, or make a definite effort to produce at least one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
I don't possibly see how I can manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It's in my dressing room at home. I really think that will satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What does this have to do with me? You could hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel? Good morning, Mr. Worthing!
Good morning! For heaven's sake, stop playing that ghastly tune, Algie! How idiotic you are! Algie!
Didn't go off all right, old boy. Oh, you don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know 'tis the way she has. She is always refusing people.
Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't actually know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that she is one. She is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own relatives in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't the remotest knowledge about how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die.
That is nonsense!
It isn't!
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
Well, that is what things were originally made for.
I don't know what I'd do if I thought that. You don't think that Gwendolyn will become like a mother in about 150 years, do you, Algie?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Was that clever?
It's perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
Well, I'm sick to death of cleverness. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. It's become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had few fools left.
We have.
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
Oh, the fools. About the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, have you told Gwendolyn yet about you being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
The truth isn't the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her, if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
That is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Oh, I shall have gotten rid of him by the end of the week. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die quite suddenly of apoplexy, don't they?
Yes, but that's hereditary. It's a sort of thing that runs in families. You had much better say a severe chill.
You're sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of the kind?
Of course it isn't.
Well then, Earnest to be carried off in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Earnest. Won't you feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, that's all right. Cecily is not a silly romantic girl. She has a capital appetite, goes long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
And I will take very good care that you never do. She is excessively pretty and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who's only just 18?
One doesn't just blurt these things out to people. Gwendolyn and Cecily are sure to be very great friends. I'll bet you anything you like, half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that after calling each other a lot of other things first. Now, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you know it is nearly 7?
Oh, it is always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Go to a theatre?
Oh, I hate listening.
Well, let us go to a club.
I hate talking.
Well, we might trot round to the Empire at 10.
I can't bear to look at things. It's so silly.
Well, what shall we do?
Nothing.
It is awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind hard work where there is no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do that. Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children have to say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But, although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Darling!
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character has made you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Wilton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Until Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn round now.
Thank you. I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out now.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall not be back till Monday. You can put on my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
There's a sensible, intellectual girl, the only girl I ever saw in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm just a bit anxious over poor Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care, your friend of Bunbury is going to get into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious in life.
That is nonsense! You never talk anything but nonsense!
Nobody ever does.
Cecily! Surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Morton's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it to page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German as he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one with a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is often why he looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometime. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I know you certainly would. You know, German and geology and other things of the kind influence a man very much.
I am not sure that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I am not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so shall he reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really do not see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter all the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe memory is responsible for nearly all 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I hate novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so. But it seems very unfair. Was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I mean it in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble entering up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble! This is indeed a pleasure.
How are you this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to go on a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
Yes, Miss Prism, I know that. But I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that, and not my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive?
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphors were drawn from the bees. I suppose Mr. Worthing has not returned from town yet.
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes, he usually likes to spend his Sundays in London. He is not one whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion, merely drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it some good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German!
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4 the Albany W. Uncle Jack's brother! Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden together. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Tell him to come out here. I suppose you had better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I've never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he'll look just like everyone else. He does!
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You must be under some sort of mistake. I am not little. In fact, I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are my cousin Earnest. My wicked cousin Earnest.
Oh, I am not wicked at all. You mustn't think that I'm wicked.
Well, if you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be bad, but being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, of course I've been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
Now that you mention the fact, I've been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I'm sure it must have been pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I cannot understand how you were here at all. Uncle Jack won't arrive until Monday afternoon.
That's a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up to the first train Monday morning, for I have a business appointment that I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know how important it is to not keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty in life. But still, I think you had better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
But my what?
You're emigrating. Uncle Jack has gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think this will require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, Uncle Jack said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the accounts I've received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, Cousin Cecily.
Oh, I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
I think it is rather quixotic of you, but I still think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one wants to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you, but might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A Malish O'Neill?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I could care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The practice and precept of the primitive church is distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And what you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, is that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should really be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often I've been told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended upon. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphors were drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us back to the schools?
Miss Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing!
We did not expect you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you're well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust that this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother,
More shameful debts and extravagance?
Still leading a life of pleasure.
dead.
Your brother Ernest dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolences. At least you have the consolation of knowing you're always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Earnest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with them at the end?
No, he died abroad, in Paris, in fact. I just had a telegram from the manager of the Grand Hotel last night.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to draughts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the end. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of mana can be adapted to almost any situation, joyful or, in the present case, distressing. I've preached at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, days of humiliations, and festal days. The last time I preached it was in the cathedral, as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society of the Prevention of the Discontentment among the Upper Orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. You know how to christen, all right? I mean, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in the parish. I've often spoken to poor classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you're interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother, I believe, was unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. I am very fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely you've been christened already, Mr. Worthing.
Not that I remember.
Do you have any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling, indeed the immersion of adults, is perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need no apprehensions. The sprinkling is all that is necessary, and I think it advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish this ceremony performed?
I might trot around about 5 if that suits you.
Perfectly, perfectly. I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins in one of your outlying cottages. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. Now, dear Mr. Worthing, I must not intrude into the house of sorrow any longer. I merely beg you not to be too bowed down by grief. What seem to us as bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me to be a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I'm so pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes have you got on? Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child, my child!
Uncle Jack, what's the matter? Do look happy. You look as if you've had a toothache. And I have got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother, Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother.
Uncle Jack, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out, and then you'll shake hands with him, won't you?
These are very joyful tidings!
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. I think it's perfectly absurd. Good heavens!
Brother John, I have come up from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I've given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. His coming down here is disgraceful, and he knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest here has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be good in one who is kind to an invalid and often leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bit of pain.
He's been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or anything of the kind. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side, but I must say that I think that Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful, especially considering that this is the first time I've come here.
Uncle Jack, if you do not shake your brother's hand, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me.
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the only time I shall ever do it.
It's beautiful, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, my little task of reconciliation is over.
You've done a beautiful action today, dear child.
I feel very happy.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
Algy, you young scoundrel! You've got to get out of this place immediately! I will not allow any Bunbury here!
I've put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I've unpacked it and put it into the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Ernest has suddenly been called back into town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful lie you are, Jack! I've not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
Well, I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
Don't talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It's perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who's actually staying with you for a whole week in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You're not staying with me for a week as a guest or anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
Well, I certainly won't leave you so long as you are in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. If not, it'd be most unkind.
Will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, so as long as you're not long. I've never seen anybody take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, it is better than being as always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by always being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train, and I wish you a pleasant journey back into town. This Bunbury, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I believe it has been a great success. I am in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her before I go and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He has sent the dog cart for me.
Is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I am afraid so, and quite a painful parting it is.
It is always painful to part from friends you've known for a brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity. But even a momentary separation from one you've just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Quite right.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Miriam, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite openly and frankly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you a great credit, Ernest. If you'll allow me, I shall copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a record of a young girl's thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I shall hope you'll order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Pray, Ernest, don't cough. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should say you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't make much sense, does it?
Cecily!
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
It'll be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack confessed to us that he had a brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course have formed the chief topic of conversation between Miss Prism and I. And a man who is much talked about is very attractive. One feels there is something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. But when was our engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other, and after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree there. The next day I bought this little ring in your name, and here is the bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you to always wear.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's my excuse for your leading such a bad life. And here is the box in which I keep all your letters.
My letters! But my own sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote to me after I'd broken off our engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was, on March 22nd. You could see the entry if you'd like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why on earth did you break off our engagement? What had I done? I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I am very much hurt to hear you broke off our engagement, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it would have hardly been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily!
You dear romantic boy!
You will never break off our engagement again, won't you?
I don't think I could now that I've actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name!
Yes, of course.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling. But it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name is Earnest. It is a name that inspires absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
But my dear child, if I had some other name, couldn't you still love me?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
Oh, but I don't like the name of Algernon.
My own sweet, little, loving little darling. I can't see why I should object to the name of Algernon. It is not at all a bad name. In fact, it's a very aristocratic name. Half the chaps who end up in the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But my own Cecily, if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character. but I fear I might not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Your rector here is, I suppose, and thoroughly experienced in all the rites and rituals of the church.
Oh, yes. Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must speak to him on a most important christening. I mean, on most important business.
Oh.
I shan't be away for more than half an hour.
Considering that we've been engaged since February the 14th, and I only met you today for the first time, I find it rather hard that you leave a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is! I must enter his proposal into my diary.
A Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing. On very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Is it Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing headed over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea, please.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, surely met one of the many good elderly women associated with Uncle Jack and his philanthropic work in London. I don't like women who are associated with philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
A Miss Fairfax.
Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we're going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me after we've known each other such a short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've never heard of Papa, I suppose.
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that's quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. And certainly, once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It's a part of her system. So do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolen. I'm quite fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh, no, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, along with the assistance of Miss Prism, have the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh! He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I'm not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I met you. But I am bound to state that now that I know that you're Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Pray do. I believe whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candour, Cecily, I wish you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honour. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
But it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Oh, he never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say that they have not been on good terms for quite some time.
That accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I've never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you've lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship for like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it's not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolen, there is no need to make a secret of it to you. Our county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
Dear Cecily, I'm afraid there's been some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post Saturday at the latest.
Dearest Gwendolen, there must be some misconception, for Ernest proposed to me 10 minutes ago.
Oh, that is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I'm so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I am afraid I have the prior claim.
Dearest Gwendolen, it would distress me more than I can say if it causes you any mental or physical anguish, but I feel bound to state that since Ernest proposed to you, he's clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow had been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once and with a firm hand.
Whatever entanglement my boy may have gotten himself into, I will not reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you mean to say, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped him in an engagement? How dare you? When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I'm glad to say I have never seen a spade. It is obvious to me that our social sphere has been widely different.
Shall I lay the tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Ah, yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills, quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town?
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
This is what the newspapers are calling agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering from it just at present. It's almost an epidemic, I'm told. Shall I serve you tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you, detestable girl. But I require tea.
Sugar?
No, sugar's not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
And that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
I do believe I am trespassing on your valuable time, Miss Fairfax. No doubt you have calls of a similar character to make in the neighbourhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest. A moment. May I ask if you're engaged to be married to this young lady?
To sweet little Cecily? Of course not. What could have fit such an idea in your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there was some misconception, Gwendolen. The gentleman whose arm is round your waist at present is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack!
Oh! Here is Ernest.
My own love!
A moment. May I ask, are you engaged to this lady right here?
What young lady? Good heavens! Gwendolen!
Yes, to good heavens, to Gwendolen.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who's now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Are you really called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked, but my name is certainly John. It's been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced upon us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet old Gwendolen.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one thing I would like to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea, Mr. Worthing. There is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolen, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. I have never been reduced to such a painful position in my lifetime, and I'm really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have never had a brother in my life. I have no brother at all, and I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
No,
Not even of any kind?
not even of any kind.
Well, I'm afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It isn't a fun position for a young girl to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture after us there.
Certainly. Men are such cowards, aren't they?
This ghastly set of things is what you call Bunbury, I suppose?
Yes, and quite a wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, you have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has the right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist? Good heavens!
Well, one must be serious about something to have any enjoyment in life. I happen to be serious about Bunburying. What you are serious about, I haven't the remotest idea. About everything I should fancy, you have such an absolutely trivial nature.
The only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You'll be able to run down to the country as often as you used to Algie, and quite a good thing too.
Well, your brother is a little off-color, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear off to London as frequent as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
And as for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that you're taking in a sweet, simple, inexperienced girl to be quite inexcusable, and to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defense for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I'm engaged to Gwendolyn. I love her.
I simply
That is
want to
all.
be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there is any likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax ever being united.
That is no business of yours.
If it were my business, I wouldn't talk about it. Only people like stockbrokers do that. And then merely at dinner parties.
How can you sit there calmly eating muffins when we're in this horrible trouble I can't quite make out? You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, one can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. The only way to eat muffins is to eat them quite calmly.
I say it's perfectly heartless. You're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. When I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the current moment, I am eating because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
That is no reason at all why you should eat them in that greedy manner.
When you have tea cake, I don't like tea cake.
I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden?
But you have just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you, under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algie, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having my dinner. Nobody goes anywhere without having their dinner first, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I just recently made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I had made arrangements myself to be christened this afternoon by Dr. Chasuble, and I naturally will take the name of Earnest. Gwendolyn would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest. That's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence at all that I've ever been christened by anybody, and I find it extremely probable I never was. And so does Dr. Chasuble. You, on the other hand, have been christened already.
Yes, but I have not been christened for many years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So no, my constitution can stand it. If you're ever quite unsure about your ever having been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. We can't possibly forget that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
You said yourself a severe chill wasn't hereditary.
I know, it isn't to be, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
That is nonsense. You are always talking nonsense.
Jack, you have the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 muffins left. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake!
Why on earth do you want tea cake to be served to your guests? What ideas do you have on hospitality?
Algie, I don't want you here. I've already asked you to leave. Why don't you go?
Well, I still have my tea left, and there's still 1 muffin left.
They didn't follow us into the house at once, as anyone else would have done. Seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left. They have been eating muffins! That looks like repentance. Neither of them seems to notice us at all. Could you cough? I haven't got a cough. They're looking at us. What a country! They're approaching. That's very forward of them. Let us preserve a dignified silence. Certainly. It's the only thing to do now. This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect. A most distasteful one. But we will not be the first to speak. Certainly not. much depends on your reply. Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's mother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
That does not seem like an unsatisfactory response. Yes, if you can believe. I don't. That does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer. True, in matters of great importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have the opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt this, Fairfax?
I have many doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the time for genuine skepticism. Their explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have a stamp of truth. I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity. So you think we should forgive them? Yes. No, I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. But, which if I should tell them, the task is not a pleasant one. Could not they speak at the same time? An excellent idea. I must always speak at the same time as others. You will take the time, will you not? Certainly. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For me, you're prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
For my fate, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned. Men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing. Darling!
Darling!
Gwendolen! What does this mean? Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma. Come here. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young and of physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, by my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence was purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than unusually lengthy lecture at the University Extension Scheme on proper income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. I have not undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. You will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this point, on this point, and indeed on all points. I am firm.
But I am to be engaged to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no. Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did he die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
I killed Bunbury this afternoon. Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Oh, Bunbury, he was, quite exploded.
Was he the victim of some revolutionary outrage? I was not aware Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he was well punished for his mobility.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean he was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. That's what I mean. So Bunbury died.
He must have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he came to some definite course of action and acted on the proper medical advice. And now that we have gotten rid of this Mr. Bunbury, Mr. Worthing, may I ask who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is holding in what seems to me to be a most peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That young lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward. I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I do not know whether there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air in this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that seems to go on seems to me to be above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I believe some preliminary inquiry would not be out of place on my part. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all associated with any of the larger railway stations in London? I really desire information. I was not aware until yesterday that any person's or family's origin could be a terminus.
Miss Cecily Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Square SW, Jervis Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, 5 Shire NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspires confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof of authenticity do I have?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period, Lady Bracknell. They are open to your inspection.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, Markby, and Markby.
Markby, and Markby. A firm of the very highest in the profession. One of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
That is very kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, confirmation, vaccination, registration, whooping cough, and the measles, both the English and German variety.
A life crowded with incident, I see. Though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I myself am not in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, may I ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune?
About £130,000 in the funds. But that is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased I've seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000! And in the funds! Why, Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady. You girls have any really solid qualities that last, and any qualities that improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come here, child. Oh, pretty child. Oh, your dress is sadly simple. and your hair seems almost as if nature might have left it. But we can soon alter that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous result in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to a young lady Lansing, and after 3 months, her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew that.
Kindly turn around, sweet child. No, No, the side view is what I want. Yes. Quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The chin, a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. It is worn very high, just at present. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care two pence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. My dear, you must know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I myself do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
You may address me as Aunt Augusta for the future. Thank you, Aunt Augusta. The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta. To speak frankly, I am not in favor of long engagements. They often give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which is never advised.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this marriage is quite out of the question. Miss Cardew cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age, and that consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an exceptionally, I may almost say an ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more could one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but I do not approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful! My nephew Algernon. Impossible. He is an Oxonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, my temporary absence in London, on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house on false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I have just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier-Jouet wine that I was specially reserved for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. What makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly well aware from the start that I have no brother. I have never had a brother in my life, and I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided to completely overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable.
Come here, child. How old are you, dear? Well, I'm really only 18, but I've always admitted 20 when I go to evening parties. You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. A woman should never be accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, soon you will be free from the restraints of tutelage, so I believe your guardian's consent will not be a matter of importance after all.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you again, Lady Bracknell. But according to the terms of my grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women who, of the very highest of birth, have remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. From the time I have known her, she has remained 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40. So, Mr. Worthing, Worthing, I believe there is no reason why Miss Cardew should not be, well, even more attractive at the age you mention than the age she is at the present. It would be a large accumulation of property. Algernon, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could. You know I could.
Yes, I felt that instinctively. Even I couldn't wait all that time. I hate even waiting 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I value punctuality in others. And waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
And what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief. Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew has positively stated that she could not wait until the age of 35, a remark which seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider.
But, Lady Becknell, the decision is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolyn, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You are quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
And a passionate celibacy is all that anyone can wish for.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolyn. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Gwendolyn, we have missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more would expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christening.
The christening, sir! Is that not somewhat premature?
Both of these men have expressed their desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he were to hear about how you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand then that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that as things are now with the Strasbourg, it would be much use to either of us.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savour of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I completely refuted before my own public sermons. However, as your mood seems peculiarly secular, I shall return to my church at once. In fact, I've been just informed by a curate that for an hour and a half Miss Prism has been waiting for me in my vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I bear you mention of Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I am on my way to join her.
Pray I detain you for a moment. This matter might be of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and I. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, commonly connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position Miss Prism holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, for the last 3 years, has been Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting for you there for 1 hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism. Prism! Where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104, Upper Crowsner Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. Through the thorough investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was found at midnight in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained a novel of a manuscript that contained more than unusually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism! Where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit the shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
This is a matter of no small importance. I insist on knowing where you put the handbag.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations of London.
What station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, will you wait for me here?
You're not too long. I'll wait for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare hardly suspect Dr. Chasuble. As you can hardly imagine, in families of the utmost importance, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered a thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if you were having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They're always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
I wish you would arrive at some conclusion.
Suspense is terrible. I have lost.
Is this the handbag that you lost? Think carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here is the entry it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus, an incident that occurred at Leamington. And here is the stain on the lining caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage. And here on the look are my initials! I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had to have them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I am delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience to be without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more than the handbag is restored to you. I was the baby you placed inside of it.
You?
Yes! Mother!
Mr. Worthing! I am unmarried!
Unmarried? I must admit this is a serious blow. But who has the right to pass a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why have one law for man and another for women? Mother, I forgive you!
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the woman who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I am afraid the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother! Then I have a brother after all! I always knew I had a brother! Certainly, how could you have ever doubted I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you're going to have to start treating me with more respect in the future. You've never acted to me like a brother in your life.
Well, not till today, old boy. I admit, I did my best, however, I was out of practice.
My own! But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you've become someone else?
I'm quite formidable. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose?
I never change, except in my affections.
The question had better be cleared up at once. Augusta, at the time when Miss Prism had left me in the handbag, had I been christened?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Well, being the eldest, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall, though I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years. And that was the result of an Indian climate, marriage, indigestion, and other things of the kind.
Algy, can you not recollect your father's Christian name? My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old. Augusta, I suppose his name would appear in the court guides of the period?
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life, but I have no doubt his name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records will be my constant study. And names. Maximum, Nagley, Migsby, ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief, Lieutenant Colonel, 1840, Captain, Christian names, Earnest John. Then my name was Earnest after all. I mean, naturally, it has always been Earnest.
Yes, I now recall that the general's name was Earnest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
My own Ernest! I thought from the first that you could have known his name.
Gwendolyn, it is a horrible thing for a man to find out he's been speaking nothing but the truth his entire life. Could you forgive me?
I can. I'm sure to change.
Darling.
Letitia!
Frederick! At last!
Cecily! At last! Gwendolyn, at last!
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Augusta, I think I've finally realized, for the first time in my life, the vital importance of being earnest.